how do I write a case study so that the person I deliver it to, they could use it in their LinkedIn profile? Because I know that engineers, developers, that persona, they don't often think about brand building in that way. And so for me, that's my job. I'm like, how can I help make you look like the genius so that you want to share this as you go move throughout your career?
Welcome to the Peerbound Podcast. I'm your host, Sunny Manivannan. I'm so excited for our guest today, Emily Coleman, who is the Senior Manager and the leader of the Customer Marketing and Advocacy function at LaunchDarkly. So we at Peerbound use LaunchDarkly and we love the product. And so I know they have at least one happy customer. In fact, I know that they have hundreds and thousands of happy customers all around the world. And I'm so excited to hear about Emily's journey into customer advocacy, her early background, and all the cool things that she's doing now at LaunchDarkly. Let's get into it. Emily, welcome.
Thank you, Sunny, for having me. Super excited to be here too.
Great to have you. I wanted to start with the early days of Emily Coleman's sort of career. You are an English major from BYU. Tell us a little bit about that. Have you always loved reading and writing from an early age? What sparked your interest in language?
Yeah, so as a kid, I wanted to be the president of the United States. That was my career goal. And as I went through like high school and thought about what I wanted to major in, I really wanted to be a lawyer. And so I originally chose my major along those lines. I majored in public relations with a minor in business management, and I promptly dropped out. I just could not hack it in college. I had undiagnosed ADHD. I had a lot going on and I hated the program. I hated public relations. Just nothing about it really spoke to me. So I took a break. And it wasn't until I had started actually into my career, I had a boss that was really insistent that I go back and finish my bachelor's degree because of my age. I was attempting to make upward mobility in my career right after the 2008 crash. And I was really struggling to make any kind of inroads in my career development because I did not have a 4-year degree. So he encouraged me to go back. And when I went back, I had the option basically of re-entering that public relations program and doing a couple semesters to finish up what I had left. Because I'd actually got my associate's degree at the time I graduated from high school. So I already had a 2-year degree and I was trying to finish up these last 2 years. And as I thought about that, I decided I really wanted to go back and do something that I loved because at this point, the degree did not matter so much. What it was didn't matter
Right.
because I already had the job experience. So I was like, I'm going to go back and do something that I love. And I loved English literature. I had always gotten A's in those classes. I was like, I know I can pass those. And I got a minor in editing, which was under our English language department. So I also took a number of English language courses. And it was a fantastic experience. Being in the humanities at BYU was just like such a great experience. And I would not have done it any other way. I have even encouraged my daughter, major in something that you love. Don't worry so much about like what that means for your career. You can figure that out. My English literature degree taught me how to think critically and has been super valuable in every job I've ever had just because of the skills that it gave me.
First of all, super inspiring journey. I mean, we're just scratching the surface of your career so far, and I'm already inspired by just the challenges you had to overcome to get to that point. And the advice of actually doing something that you're interested in, I think is just so relevant, more relevant today than ever before.
Yeah, especially in an age of AI. I think there's a lot of talk about what does AI mean for different degrees or different job responsibilities. And I firmly believe that humanities are going to be as important as ever because regardless of whatever happens with machine learning, AI, and all of that, we still need folks who can think critically. And those degrees, I think, are just unmatched in being able to provide that and that holistic like outlook about how do you think through problems.
100%. And yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think as you were talking about your journey to becoming an English literature major, I was thinking and chuckling a little bit internally about how in this world of AI, we're all just parsing words every single day. And there's already an explosion of words that are about to hit our eyeballs. And
Yeah.
it's only going to get worse, right? There's going to be videos. It's all messaging coming at you. And your brain has to be super well trained to be able to parse out what's real, what's not real, what are they trying to sell me, what do I actually need, and so on. So everything you're saying is spot on. So you go back to school, you do end up getting that 4-year degree. You already have some work experience. So does the presidency of the United States dream still live within Emily Coleman? Take me through that time. Do you go back into politics?
Yeah. So when I left the first time, when I dropped out, I ended up working for a politician, a member of Congress here in Utah. This was, again, I started that in 2009. I was young. They had no business hiring me for that, but I think they hired me because I was cheap. And I had never done anything like that. Like, I did not have a degree in political science. I did, however, really love politics and government. I did that. That was the thing that I did with my dad. So I did a lot of conventions and campaigns. I was doing campaigns from the time I was like 10. It was something that I always wanted to do and ended up getting a job as a office manager. So I was not in DC. I was still at home in Utah in the district office. One of the things that was my responsibility was answering phones. I was the customer service line for the federal government, and that was a
Oh,
baptism by fire for
yes.
sure, especially post 2008. It was a very interesting
Yeah.
time. The other part of my responsibilities were casework. So I was responsible for being a liaison between constituents and federal agencies. So if someone came to us with an immigration, social security, veterans affairs, any problem that involved a federal agency, and oftentimes like these were very desperate situations. By the time they got to me, they had exhausted every resource. And my job was to get it unstuck. I had contacts within federal agencies, and I basically worked to try to solve those problems. That became the most rewarding part of that job for me. I was not involved really much in legislation. All I was
Mhm.
doing was answering phones, attending meetings on behalf of my boss, and doing this casework. I did that and then moved to a different congressional office, basically full time as a caseworker. I managed a caseload of about 300 to 350 cases a year.
That's a case a day, more than that.
Yeah, it was a lot. I had to become an expert in how immigration policy worked, like from the State Department, Homeland Security. I had to understand the entire Social Security Administration flow through
Yep.
disability. It was a lot, but it was so rewarding because when you were actually able to make something happen for somebody, it was life changing. I'll tell one story about that. I don't think I'll ever forget. I had a man who was from Uganda, and he had come here and was working at a hotel, and he was here on an asylum visa, and he was trying to get his family here. So his wife and his children were still in Uganda. They were separated, and he just could not figure out a way to get them here to the US. And we were able to make that happen, like get that asylum visa process for his family, and they were able to come. And he brought his kids all dressed up in their Sunday best to take a picture with me because they were so excited and so grateful to be here. And it was like one of these things that you're sitting there going, like, this is just part of what I do every day.
Totally.
But it was so meaningful because this family was together and they were safe.
Totally.
And they were so happy. And I remember I saw him at that hotel a couple of years later, and he recognized me immediately and was like, "Oh my gosh, how are you doing?" And it's just one of those things that, like, the stuff that I was doing there was actually changing people's lives.
Totally. I mean, yeah, it's an incredible story. And, those 350 cases, every single one of those, you're restoring people's faith in government, right? Just, hey, this thing actually works. And here, yes, it's not as fast as you want. It's not as efficient or effective as you want, but it does work. And there are people that are on your side in the government who are trying to make this work
Yeah.
for you specifically. That's incredible.
Yeah. And it
That's
didn't matter
incredible.
which party, like, none of that mattered in my
Yep.
job. It was just because that wasn't part of it there. I was there to represent and serve the people in my neighborhood. because I lived in the
Totally.
district where I worked.
That's incredible. So you do this for a few years. At what point do you discover tech, and how does that happen? What got you into the technology industry in the first place? And I don't remember if your first job was directly in customer advocacy, but would also love to learn more about how you got into customer advocacy through that.
Yeah. So I decided to make a career switch because I needed more money. Federal government did not pay
A good reason for
enough.
all of us. Yes, we've all done that.
Yeah. And so I was like, I think it's time to break out into the private sector. There were also, I mean, I don't think I have to explain to anybody why leaving the House of Representatives was a good idea at that time. It was about 2014 that I left. So I found a job. Initially, I was like, okay, I want to be a copywriter. I have a degree in English literature, so I guess it kind of makes sense, and a minor in editing. So I'd like to do that. So I got a job working for a physician owned healthcare group here. They were working on a rebrand. So they were originally called Central Utah Clinic. In Utah, Central Utah kind of indicates a more like rural area, but they were really along the main population corridor. And so they needed a name that better reflected who they were. I was brought on to help with that rebrand and redo a lot of their content strategy. Communications was kind of the role there. That was incredibly fun. And the rebrand was a lot of fun. The rebrand is still there today. So every time I go to that clinic, I'm like, yeah, I'm as part of renaming this.
Cool.
It taught me a lot about that. And then I moved into tech again, just because that was growing a lot in Utah at the time. It still is. There's a lot of companies that are headquartered in Utah. And so it felt like a good move. And I ended up getting a job at Pluralsight. And that was my first tech job. And it was as a copywriter. I'll be completely frank, that was kind of an unmitigated disaster. I joined and
you got to have one of those at least in a tech career. If you don't have that, you haven't earned your stripes.
Yeah, it just did not work out for a lot of different reasons. I joined because I was planning to do content for a particular segment of their audience, designers, engineers, and even like video game. That was kind of the persona I was writing for. But almost immediately after I joined, they merged me into a different department. And I got moved into writing about a lot higher tech stuff. So at that time, they were having me write some email content about people who were using Azure. And I didn't even know what Azure was at the time. And I was like, I have no, and the ChatGPT wasn't around. So I couldn't even pretend like I could write about this type of stuff. These were for network systems engineers, just stuff that I was like, I have no clue. I don't have any idea. I had no concept of what this was on any level. And so I got fired from that job for a lot of different reasons, but some of it probably was just I could not hack it fast enough to get up to speed on whatever it was they wanted me to write about. So after that, I decided I don't want to do copywriting anymore because it's too subjective. And I didn't really love writing for 8 hours a day. What it did is give me some exposure to some other roles within marketing that I was kind of unaware that existed. And I was like, I want to have metrics that are not based on vibes. You know, does somebody like this? Because it's really difficult to understand. Everyone has a different opinion about what makes good copy.
Totally.
And I was like, I can't be at the mercy of that anymore. I decided I wanted to work for a company that was big enough that I could kind of disappear, because being fired kind of shattered my confidence a lot. I had emerged out of this congressional role and I was in my 20s. I was like, I can do anything. And then I got fired and I was like, I can't do anything. Like, do I even deserve to work kind of thing? So I was looking for a company that I could kind of just put my head down and do a job and go home, especially because my daughter was quite young at the time. And I was like, I just need something that feels stable.
Yep.
And so I found SolarWinds. And honestly, it was a great fit in that respect. For the first probably 3 years or so, I was doing sales enablement. I was in customer marketing. I was writing a lot of sales enablement emails. I was running a lot of sales enablement programs and didn't really have any sense of how my job connected to any kind of greater purpose. But I was like, that's fine. No one is firing me. Yeah. I probably spent the first couple of years throwing up before every one-on-one because I was so nervous that like this is the one where they're going to fire me. It took those 3 years to like rebuild that faith in myself that I knew how to do stuff. Then the customer marketing org at SolarWinds reorged and I got a new boss, and she saw something in me and began to push me back into this direction of being more visible. She encouraged me to take on lifecycle marketing at SolarWinds, and we launched a big project to redo how we were thinking about emailing customers. And she just did not let her foot off the gas with me, even at times where I felt uncomfortable, like where I was like, I don't want to present in this meeting. I don't want people to see what I'm doing. She just kind of forced me to show up and do it. I did that for a couple of years. And then she asked me to start their customer advocacy program. This was in 2022. So SolarWinds had gone through some interesting transitions in that time, and they needed some help with customer advocacy, creating case studies, creating some kind of a reference program. All of that was on the table, and she asked me to do that, and I accepted. So that was kind of the whole journey into
Awesome.
tech and how I ended up in customer advocacy specifically. It was a winding road, but I got tons of experience in about every other aspect of customer marketing while I was at
That's
it.
awesome. Awesome journey. And I was smiling and laughing a little bit along as you were talking about the sort of confidence issues, right? Like you were feeling super confident when you came out of that job with, the Congress people, and you could do anything and you had done anything. You had the track record. Then you come into this job and they basically hire you for a different job than the one they had you doing, right? It's completely different, but it can have an impact. And the only reason we're able to laugh about it now is because it's so far in the past and it has shaped you to be the leader that you are today. But I will say there's a lot of people that we know that are going through this right now.
Yeah.
And we've gone through over the last 2 years. And it's incredible to hear you talk about and reflect on this experience in your career, knowing that, people are going through this right now.
Yeah, it's tough. I wish I hadn't wasted so much time believing that it was my fault. But at this point, there's not much you can do about that except recognize that when you become a manager, that when you do those types of things, they have an impact on people, and to do better and to recognize that a lot of times when you get let go from jobs, it definitely does not reflect on who you are as a person.
Definitely. And I think, yeah, if I could have you scream that from the rooftops everywhere, I absolutely would. And perhaps we will, at least on LinkedIn, in our
Yeah.
small corner of the LinkedIn universe. But I
Yeah.
think that's such an important message, Emily. So thanks for sharing that. It's cool. Okay. So let me ask you about SolarWinds. It's a big company when you join. You're able to make an impact. You're starting to grow in confidence, and you have a manager and a leader who sees something in you and is pushing you out of your comfort zone, which is clearly leading to more growth. What was it like working in a big company? When did you feel like you got a grasp of what the company overall was trying to do? If somebody's at a big company right now and trying to sort of pierce through and grow their career, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, I would say that early career stage, especially because I was still relatively young at the time that I started at SolarWinds, it probably took me a good 2.5, 3 years to really understand what the company did. SolarWinds had like 60 plus products and like 7 distinct product lines, and I was working within a really small, narrow niche of them. It took me a little while to get a better sense of what
Yep.
was happening with the space. One of the best things that I did is I started to get a lot more curious about how it actually worked. I didn't limit myself to feeling like I couldn't understand it. I drew on a lot of the stuff that I learned in Congress that when I showed up, I had no idea how any of these processes worked either. Like, I did not know how an immigration application worked. I didn't know how a visa worked, but you can figure it out. And so I was like, I can figure it out. I'm looking at customers who are using this stuff and they figured out how this works. And so I certainly can learn. And so I got really curious about what is it that we do and how does it actually help customers, and even getting pretty deep into technically what is it doing. And so asking a lot of questions. For a big company, I would say it helped because I did have that initial sense of being able to dip my toes in first. Again, I was a little scared of the whole business of what they were doing anyway, because that's what had burned me at Pluralsight was the network and systems engineers stuff. Immediately going into that, I actually, in my interview, was like, yeah, I've written for this persona, knowing that I had failed so epically at it, that I was like, see, I have experience in this, but like it was all bad, but they didn't know that. So I felt like that was going to be kind of the end. There were a lot of things about working for a big company that I really loved, and that like if I made a mistake, it wasn't going to take down the company. It wasn't going to have this massive impact. And where I was in that development of confidence and career, that's kind of exactly what I needed, was just to be able to watch and learn from a lot of other people rather than being responsible for all of that.
That makes a lot of sense. Every time I hear SolarWinds, you know what I'm going to ask you. I'm going to ask you about the SolarWinds hack.
Yeah.
And I want to ask you from just the perspective of being the customer advocacy leader when that happens, right? You're the sort of, and all of us in this function are the happy-go-lucky, everything's great with customers people within that company. And now there's this big hack that impacts every customer. It's a huge deal. It's in the news, global news. All customer advocacy leaders go through company crises at various times, and they are part of the response team, whether they want to be or not. What was it like for you? What advice, if any, do you have for people who might be in a similar situation, either now or coming up in the future?
Yeah. So I'll clarify that I started the customer advocacy program in 2022. So it was a couple of years after that breach had happened. I was still in the customer marketing team. And I'll say, we had, I feel like, a lot of really talented people doing crisis response there. And that was everybody down from like comms and PR to folks on the phone doing support and, customer success managers and account executives. That was a really tough time in that I went from working for a company that no one heard of. I remember I was in Iceland one time and I had a water bottle that had SolarWinds on it, and I left it at the security checkpoint. And I was trying to explain that like I needed this water bottle that had SolarWinds on it. And this poor Icelandic man was trying to explain to somebody that I actually meant the auroras. And I was like, no, I don't mean the auroras. Like I don't mean Aurora Borealis. I don't mean the Northern Lights. I mean like it actually says SolarWinds. Yeah, he was like, you're stupid. She just doesn't know. She's American. So no one knew what SolarWinds was. To like everybody knew. My parents knew what SolarWinds was all of a sudden. And that was horrifying because my dad's a college professor. And so he still doesn't really know what I do, but he's like, don't you work for this company? And it's like, SolarWinds exposes all of the US government's data to the Russians. I was like, oh man, I thought I got out of this drama when I left Congress. And then I'm like right back in it. But it was unique in that there was so much communication that had to happen so quickly. And then in the aftermath, after other breaches have happened, the bigger breaches have happened. Now we're 2 years later, and it's like, okay, we have to build a customer advocacy program and develop case studies for a company that folks don't really want to say that they're using because it could make them a target. That was playing customer advocacy on hard mode. For sure.
That is really challenging.
When it came to doing case studies, I just basically started as small as possible. I took anybody who would give me a story. Totally. I worked with our MVPs for my Slack community. And I was like, it doesn't matter to me how small this company is. I'm not looking to get any blue chip logos. I just want to start telling some stories about how customers are using it. And I think by the time I left, we'd really crossed some of these big hurdles. People were excited to talk about how they were using the product again, but it was challenging. And I had to really get people to trust me that I was not there to make them a billboard for SolarWinds. I was trying to talk about the cool things that they were doing that were going unnoticed, because especially in IT, no one notices what's going on with IT. No one pays attention to it until something breaks. And then everyone's paying attention to it. It's a job that when you're doing it well, it's just expected. And you only get attention when things are not going well.
Yeah, 100%. Man, love the story of that time. And congrats to everybody on the team who was there and on getting through and moving forward. That's cool. I want to ask you about LaunchDarkly, which is where you are now, and you've been there for now almost a year. Tell me about what prompted you to make the switch away from SolarWinds, which had been, a great opportunity, got your confidence back and accomplished some amazing things in some very challenging times. What made you say, okay, it's time for me to go try something different?
Yeah, I'd been at SolarWinds for 7 years at that point. So it was a very long time. SolarWinds had been really generous in helping me pay for an MBA. So I did an MBA during that time. They also offered a benefit where after you'd been with the company for 5 years, you got a 4-week sabbatical. So I took a 4-week sabbatical. I was in the middle of my MBA when I was actually eligible for it. So I didn't take it then. But after I graduated, I spent a month on a road trip with my kid and my
Awesome.
partner. We drove
Awesome.
from Utah in a little teardrop camper all the way from Utah. And we ended up in upstate New York and all the way in
Awesome.
Boston, and then drove back in the space of about a month. And during that time, I thought a lot about what I wanted to do next because I was considering taking a larger leadership role within SolarWinds, or it was time to move on. And I felt at that point that I wanted to try something different with a smaller company. I was also looking at companies that were more geared towards like engineering and DevOps. I learned that I really liked that segment a little bit more than I did traditional IT. And so I wanted to work with engineers, developers, some of these builders, which is a market that SolarWinds was in a little bit, but I wanted to do it more. And LaunchDarkly in particular, I had been at reInvent, AWS reInvent in 2023. So November, December 2023. And I remember I was just walking around looking at the different booths, and I saw LaunchDarkly's booth, and I got a pair of socks, and I did a demo with their team. And after I left, I thought, I want to work here. Like, I want to work somewhere like here. This is the kind of place that I
It's
want to
cool.
work. They all seemed like they were having fun. And like, I thought the product was really cool. I understood it as somebody who was only tangentially involved in tech. And I was like, this looks like a place that is on the up and up. I'd like to work here. And so when I started looking for companies to apply for, I was looking for companies that were really similar to LaunchDarkly. But it like just so happened that while I was looking, a job for customer advocacy opened up at LaunchDarkly.
It's
And
awesome.
I mean, I'd probably within like a couple hours of that job posting, I had submitted my resume and I wrote this cover letter that was like, listen, you have to at least interview me because I know so much about your product. I really want to be here and I'm really excited about what you guys are doing. Like, I'm not just
Awesome.
saying that for this cover letter. Please at least interview me. And they did. And so it was like completely cold. I did not have a connection at LaunchDarkly
No way.
at
So
that
no,
point.
no
No,
second. Wow.
like
Emily,
no connection.
that's like inspiration number 4 already in this conversation that
Yeah.
you just wrote a kick-ass cover letter that was just
Yeah. I was just
heartfelt.
like, do it. I was like, I really want this. And I said that in my interview too. I was like,
It's
look,
awesome.
I was at your booth at reInvent last year and I feel like this is some place that I can really make a
Awesome.
difference. I can do something for you here. And my manager at the time, Tia, she hired me. And I still am kind of like, sometimes I look at my email address and it says the at LaunchDarkly at the end. And I'm just like, I can't believe that actually happened. It's honestly still kind of a pinch me type of thing that
Super
I'm like,
cool.
I can't believe that I'm here because it's just like, I can't believe it worked out that way.
Super cool. By the way, it is a cool product. Like I said, we're a happy customer and we're a tiny startup, right? And so there's
Yeah.
thousands, if not tens of thousands of companies that are super happy customers and incredible product. Very cool. I want to ask you about one or two last things at LaunchDarkly. So you recently revamped what is every customer advocacy manager's like probably number one thing that they would fix if they could is their customer stories page. And walk me through that process. Like when you got in, you clearly had a vision for what you wanted to fix, and this was on the list. How did you even get started with a project like this? Walk me through what inspired you to end up with the page that you have now, which looks stunning. Walk us through that process.
Thank you. I'll say the design and everything is like so much owed to other teams that web development design team. You could never do these things without those people. But what I wanted to do was make a page that had a different variety of content. I think we often just stick all of our case studies on there, and that's kind of it. Our existing page had just a few filters, but I was like, I know that this page is going to be a very top of funnel type of page for people. So knowing that B2B buyers are doing like 70, 80% of their research before they ever hit one of our reps. I'm like, I need to have as much information and as much breadth of information for them to go through as possible. We also need to make it easier for them to see outcomes. And I also wanted some flexibility to do some testing. So that was kind of where we started from. And I had a lot of different thoughts or ideas or inspiration, like a bunch of different companies that were doing something that was really similar to what I wanted to do. So I basically put all of those together in a mood board situation where I was like, I really like the way they've done the menu bar here. I really like the way they've done the scrolling hero here. I really love the cards. I love how the cards kind of flip. I like having motion in it so that when you mouse over it, it flips and you can see a quote. And also just
Cool.
like connecting the people who were doing these case studies with us, like making them a little bit more front and center. So that's how we ended up with the design that we did. And I really like the way it's worked out. And one of the things we're going to hopefully work on doing soon-ish is I want to be able to test personalization with it. So if you visit that page and you're in financial services, the in the
Amazing.
hero, it will show you financial services logos and our financial services, like our ally case study first.
Amazing.
Those are the kinds of things that we're testing a little bit is, how can we serve some of this stuff up earlier? And the next phase will be actually redesigning the case study page itself. So like where the content lives. But first off, you just got to make it like organized. You have
Totally.
to think like, how would a customer want to navigate this? What would they be looking for? They're going to be looking for, how do they look like me? Industry, company size,
Totally.
all of those things.
And I love that you have metrics, but it's also, there's a lot of photos of people and these are real customers and you're representing your customers' brands in an authentic way, which I think is really meaningful as well.
Yeah. I mean, that's the whole goal for me when it comes to a case study is that this should be something that they can use. I often try to think about how do I write a case study so that the person I deliver it to, they could use it in their LinkedIn profile. They could use it on their resume. They could use it as part of their portfolio because I know that engineers, developers, that persona, they don't often think about brand building in that way. It's just not something that they're
That's right.
connecting. And so for me, that's my job. I'm right. How can I help make you look like the genius so that you want to share this as you go move throughout your career, as this is something that I did. And that should always be the purpose because the fact that it's on our website, it's implicit that they used LaunchDarkly to do, whatever. We don't need to spell that out. What we need to spell out is like, how did they make this product work for them?
Totally. Love that. The last question I want to ask you about is we haven't talked about AI. I feel like I'm almost obligated to, but I want to with you, especially just because you've experimented so much with AI. You're a writer by just desire and passion and training as well. Not to mention AI is really changing this function in a major way. I'll start with you asking you this first question, which is, what have you tried that has worked really well for you in terms of incorporating AI into your workflows? And where do you think the hype is too much and the stuff doesn't actually work well?
Yeah. So where it's worked best for me is I would say almost leveraging tools that are not supposed to be for customer marketers, like in turning them into a customer marketing tool. Pocus is a good example of this. That's supposed to be like really an SDR, BDR tool. We have all these cool signals in there. And so I'm like, can I use that to find customers that would be like, give me signals that they're ready to leave a G2 review? And then that's my list that I use to invite people to do G2 reviews. That was relatively successful. I'd say also I've started developing some custom GPTs, which are not difficult. I mean, you can use Chat GPT to help you vibe code your custom GPT. So you actually don't have to have a lot of knowledge in how to do it. You just have to be willing to dedicate some time to experiment with it. So I built a couple custom GPTs. One is I've sort of all the little tidbits of strategy knowledge or content knowledge I've put into a library of content, and that's the knowledge base for it. And so I use it as like a brainstorming type of thing for some interesting ideas for like, I've got this really cool story. How do I also turn it into something else? That's been working really, really well. also using some of the portfolio functions and pitting AI like LLMs against each other. So if I'm doing a brainstorming, I'm like telling Gemini, hey, you know, or I'll tell ChatGPT, I need you to create a brief for this. If you were going to give a copywriter, this brief to write it, then I give that brief to Gemini and I say, okay, you're a copywriter and this is the brief you've been given from the client. And then I have them kind of go back and forth. So it's just kind
That's
of like
funny.
having fun with it because it's, they all have different strengths and things that they do well. In terms of what is overhyped, I would say, to be honest, content creation is a little overhyped with AI. I
Yep.
don't think that's where we're going to end up. And
Yep.
I say this as a copywriter, not to say that humans are always better. I think the whole point of an LLM for me is that it makes me a little faster. But I am seeing just so much straight copy pasted from ChatGPT that I think is going to go away pretty quickly. People are going to be creating authentic content that does not have an emoji for every bullet point, headlines that don't have a couple words and then a colon and then a sentence. There's some tells that are coming out of content created by LLMs right now that I think are going to need to adjust how we think about it because soon we're just going to be inundated with so much LLM content that I imagine some of these big large language models, even like when you're doing Google searches and they give you that preview,
Totally.
they're going to start solving for what sounds like it's written by a human. And so for me, that's a big one. But the real power of it for customer marketing that I see coming down is that it's going to allow us to use so much data that we already collect to be more thoughtful in how we approach not only just upsell, cross-sell types of campaigns, like really understand intent, I think, and understand intent not from the perspective of like, I want them to buy more, but understand intent for what is going to make this customer's experience better.
Yep.
I think if we approach it that way, from what I do with advocacy as well, it's like, I already know that this customer's had a whole bunch of gong calls. I've got a success plan from a customer success rep. I've got all of their product usage data. I have all of this stuff. I should be able to come to this customer with a 90% written draft and have like a 15, 30-minute interview to get a few quotes. And then we're ready to publish. And also to better recognize signals when someone might be a good fit for some of these things that I need to do that are taking me a ton of time. Finding somebody to do an analyst interview takes forever because you're like, okay, I've got this list of people who like a year ago told me that they might be willing to do it, but like half those people aren't with their company anymore. And like a couple of them have an escalated support inquiry and one of them's in the middle of a big expansion or renewal deal. And so we shouldn't touch them. All of that is like manual effort that I have to find out by going somewhere else.
Totally.
And so being able to say, okay, these are people both who have expressed in the past that they would be willing to do something like this, but people you may not even know about yet that are having all these conversations and interactions with your product, with other people within the company that would also be a good fit. Because for me, it's less about giving somebody like a list, a checklist of like, do you want to do this, 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 and this, than coming to them and saying, hey, I've got this kind of cool opportunity. Like even Sunny, I did this with you recently with our award that we were like going for, right? If I come to you and say, hey, I've got this thing, would you be willing to either get on a quick call with an analyst or fill out a quick survey for us? You're going to be so much more likely to be like, oh yeah, of course, I'll totally do that. And it feels so much more organic than me being like, hypothetically, at some point in the future, would you be willing to shill for us? And it's just like, they're going to be like, no, I'm not going to do that. I don't have time because the opportunity is not actually there in front of them. So it's this real opportunity for just in time recognition of when somebody's ready to do something and kind of expand or become an advocate for you.
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, there's so much of what you said that I completely agree with, especially around how are we as human beings just going to figure out, okay, this is AI generated. The M dashes is the other big tell now.
Yeah.
Everybody's controversial M dash usage, and which is painful for me because I used to use dashes all the time and now I no longer can, but that's okay. But that's a really interesting point around how do we start to tell what's human created versus AI generated. And I think this idea of finding signals and bringing all these signals together for you in real time at the right time is what is going to drive a lot of value, not just like basic content creation, which ChatGPT can do a mediocre job of today.
Yeah, because
And
it's
it's
like,
really
does it
fascinating.
matter? Like, does writing the email matter? For me, it's like the real time saver is finding out who I need to send that email to.
That's
I
right.
don't
That's
really
exactly right.
necessarily need help writing that email. I just need to know who should I be contacting right now?
Exactly
Who's
right.
ready for me to have that outreach? That is where I think the real power is going to be.
100%. 100%. Well, Emily, I think I said this at the beginning of our call when we were prepping, and I'm standing by now. We could have 3 more episodes. I could just keep talking to you about, there's so many more topics I want to cover. Would love to have you on in a future episode. And to anybody listening, this was just a really inspiring episode. And there's so many just actionable tips from you, as well as just more philosophical, how your career has progressed. And such a joy to have you. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sunny.